Welcome back to another history adventure. Today, we will be exploring a pair of once booming mining towns known as the Silver Queen of Colorado, or the Silver Queen of the Rockies, and see why this beautiful little Rocky Mountain town and ghost town have been designated as the Georgetown Silver Plume National Historic Landmark District. With a stamp like that, and the plethora of historic structures well preserved here all along this main street right behind us is just like one example of literally hundreds of examples in this little district. There are going to be books worth of stories hiding within every rickety plank, handful of mining debris, and puff of steam coming out of this small area. To do that, we need to go back to when this was just another forest-covered valley full of resources to extract. That is why we need to travel a few miles down Clear Creek from here to Idaho Springs. To go over Georgetown, we need to know exactly why and how people were there to look for gold. So that brings us here to Idaho Springs. We are standing at the confluence of Chicago Creek right here and Clear Creek right on back there, where a monumentous event occurred for the current Kansas Territory. Well, also the Jefferson Territory, but that can be a whole nother story we can dive into another day. So traces of gold were found by prospectors in the Platte River while the Denver area was just beginning and really just kind of like a little trading area. It wasn't really much of anything. And this happened during the 1950s, slowly spreading word around that there might just be gold up in the mountains. Some early prospecting parties slowly worked their way into the Rockies, following the creeks and streams flowing through this rugged terrain. One of these hopeful souls worked their way up to Clear Creek, up through present-day Golden, and into where we are at right now, the confluence of Chicago Creek and Clear Creek, and what is now known today as Idaho Springs. While panning at this very spot, George Jackson would make a territory-changing and, well, state-forming discovery. Within his pan wasn't just loose gravel and dirt, but gold was hiding within it. So in January of 1859, the Pikes Peak, or Colorado Gold Rush, kicked off, and hordes of new faces would begin to flood this part of the Rockies to hopefully make their own claim and strike it rich with all the hidden gold beneath their feet. So later that year, two brothers were taking the same path up Clear Creek. This very creek we are standing in right now, up further past Idaho Springs. Snaking through this beautiful area, the twisting and winding waters would lead them to the meeting of South Clear Creek and Clear Creek, way up in Georgetown. Let's head on up and see what they discovered. David and George Griffin were two brothers looking to get rich in the Rockies. Originally from Kentucky, fueled by a dream that they were about to fulfill right below their feet. They had discovered gold in this very area, quickly setting up shop to try and enjoy the fruits of this dangerous and risky venture. They quickly established a camp to begin mining operations named Georgetown. The following year is when everything really started to take shape for them. When the hordes of people from around the country started to rush into this part of the Rockies due to the quickly spreading news that the discovery of the rich gold deposits in this area were true. With those brothers following Clear Creek right behind us here, and just another 100 yards up, splits in half, where Clear Creek continues on up to the right, up to Loveland Pass, and then also clears off to the left and becomes South Clear Creek. Soon, this would be known as the Griffin mining district. During this time, gold was the prized mineral everyone was looking for. So when they were mining here, the discovery of silver wasn't really a big deal, and they didn't really fully notice it until later on. Most of the silver was just simply discarded, but unbeknownst to the miners at the time, this would be the most important discovery for the mining district. To be able to have regular supplies for themselves, miners, and the mines themselves, the Griffith brothers built a road connecting Georgetown to Commerce City that included a toll. This was completed in 1860, increasing the ease of access to this area. But unfortunately, this little boom of gold would come to an end fairly quickly. The easily accessible gold deposits here were quickly depleted, and much of the gold here was in hard to process rock that really would balloon costs, making this not really a viable option to mine. By 1864, the gold boom was over for Georgetown, and it looked to become just another small boom town to become a ghost town in just a few short years. But this very year, that pesky silver was discovered to be in a much larger quantity than ever thought, and it was extremely high grade. By the following year, this gold town had completely flipped on its head and became a silver boom town, bringing in a new rush of prospectors, miners, and mines to the district. And in just a couple years, by 1867, Georgetown was booming exponentially more than ever before during that gold rush. The riches from mining and the beauty of the area brought in investors from all over the country, transforming Georgetown from a bunch of slapped together buildings, houses, and shops to a highly invested in mountain town, including the famous Paris Hotel, a dedicated fire hall which was unheard of for many mining communities like this, and even a pioneer in electricity, sprinkled with unique architecture throughout all the streets. Just like with the gold mining, they found it difficult to process the ore and make it profitable to mine in such a difficult conditions along the sides of these rugged mountains you see behind us. This forced the mills and the mines to come up with new, unique methods to overcome many of these issues. Due to the beauty and high amount of investment in the structures and in infrastructure to the area, Georgetown wasn't only a boom town, but a tourist town as well. And around this time, at the peak of the tourism, the peak of the silver boom, and the peak of investment, Georgetown received the name of the Silver Queen of the Rockies, or the Silver Queen of Colorado. But this name wouldn't last long. And not long after the height, in the late 1870s, Leadville would quickly steal this crown as one of the richest mining districts in the state, which did overshadow Georgetown, leading to a slight downturn in popularity in investment and tourism, and slight loss of workers as well, because some of the more experienced people could go over to Leadville and be paid more. This didn't completely ruin Georgetown though. The mining here was still extremely plentiful, and this area was still very prosperous after the fact. So Georgetown continued to chug along and stay an important piece of the mining communities in the Rockies during this time. But like all mining boom towns, there is normally a bust, and this was unfortunately right around the corner. It is 1893. And Georgetown has seen some slight and steady decline over the past decade, and would see a massive collapse in its mining industry from the repeal of a single act, the Sherman Silver Purchase Act of 1890 to be more specific. This would ravage the silver mines throughout the state, and really the country, completely crashing the market, forcing a booming industry to completely collapse. This act had the United States government buying 4.5 million ounces of silver each month to contribute towards the Federal Reserve, where officials that wanted to move towards a bimetallism standard for the dollar, and not just the gold standard. Basically, the plan for the United States dollar was to have it backed by gold and silver. This was repealed in 1893 during the Great Panic, which was the worst depression to hit the United States until really the Great Depression. Massive runs on banks, major and small businesses alike shut down across the country, and a significant amount of uncertainty backing the United States dollar was raging in the country, with a recovery not seen until the late 1890s. This event would turn many boom mining towns into ghost towns overnight. Georgetown and its sister town, Silver Plume, were no different. Both lost some of their luster and almost became just another cluster of scattered, abandoned homes and buildings. The decline here wasn't as abrupt as many others due to the light tourism still trickling through and slight bump in mining activity during World War I. That's mainly what kept these two towns on life support. But the ravages of the decline were becoming ever more apparent as the years kept on ticking by. Fortunately, literally a turnaround in tourism occurred in Colorado. And one of the main arteries in and out of the Rockies was built right through this pass, I-70. This significantly increased the amount of people coming through to visit this amazing area. With Silver Plume and Georgetown containing hundreds of original buildings that were surprisingly well preserved from the mining boom, this region quickly became a National Historic District in 1966. This helped increase investment in the area and keep preservation efforts going, increasing tourism and even bringing people back to town, slowly increasing the population once again. Since there are literally hundreds of historic structures in the district, there are equally as many stories to tell. Obviously, we can't go over them all, or even really know them all. So let's travel through a couple of the more interesting finds in town and work our way into Silver Plume and explore some of the history as well. So let's head into this small hydroelectric plant sitting right behind us here, built in 1900. That was used to power not just this town, but the surrounding mines, Silver Plume, and even some of Idaho Springs. So let's go check it out and see its interesting story and why Georgetown has a pretty meaningful impact on the United States Western electricity expansion. Now, the original hydroelectric plant that was in Georgetown, built in 1886, utilized DC power. This was used for basically like simple utilities, like street lamps at the time. This may sound like, oh, why, whatever. I mean, it's just some street lamps. But no, at the time, this was some cutting edge, leading technology to be able to have consistent and reliable light through electricity other than using oil lamps or other sources. The idea of having a constant power source and distribution center to power utilities and homes has really only become viable for a couple of years, mainly using DC current, or also known as direct current. This style of electric distribution was pretty short-lived because a man named Nikola Tesla helped pioneer the way for alternating current, or AC current. Once again, Georgetown became an early adopter of this new technology, and in 1900, this very hydroelectric plant was built, completely changing this town and region. But at first, this plant wasn't just hydroelectricity, it was a coal plant at first. But a couple short years later, they had finished the reservoir and the piping to come down here to power hydroelectric generators. Transferring to AC current allows for a major advance in how electricity can be transported, allowing it to be sent outside of just the localized region of Georgetown, but allowing them to send this electricity all the way up to Silver Plume and a lot of the more remote mines around the area. Electricity was even sent all the way to Idaho Springs, which was only possible due to this new advanced AC power. Georgetown became one of the early prime examples on how to use this new technology and the impressive reach AC power had compared to DC, becoming a key example and blueprint on how to create and use electricity in the rugged and unforgiving Western Territory. The power is generated here by releasing water in a reservoir a few miles up Guanella Pass in a large 30-inch pipe where it cascades down into the valley, eventually into this station. This rushing water picks up speed as it flows towards the plant in pipes. Once the water reaches the plant, all that energy is built up, pushes these cups within the turbines, spinning the entire turbine. With the turbine spinning, the generator utilizes electromagnets to generate power within the generator. The power leaves this facility and is distributed throughout this community and even outside of it, wherever it can be used, whether that was Silver Plume or even eventually Idaho Springs. This specific plant was one of the oldest operational hydroelectric plants in the United States. But unfortunately, today it is sitting dormant. As you can see, the generators behind us are quietly waiting to be activated again. Just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the Energy Museum is the Paris Hotel. This hotel is important to this town due to the large amount of original and old artifacts contained within its walls. The building was originally built in 1875 with a man named Louis Dupont, not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but would acquire it in the 1880s. He slowly added to it and customized the property through the 1890s into its current stature today, which is this large, beautiful museum, which at one point was an actual operating hotel. Along the way, amassing and preserving many artifacts of the time within the walls of the hotel. After his passing, different family members had taken control of it over the years, where it was eventually sold to the National Society of the Colonial Dames of America. That is a mouthful. Who have gone through a great deal of work to restore this historic building. It includes one of the best time capsules into what staying at a hotel in the mining boom era of the Western United States was like. So before leaving town, let's hit one final little spot. Before traveling up to the small sister town of Silver Plume, that away up the pass. So this is the original firehouse built in 1875 to protect Georgetown from any major fires which ravaged communities like this during this time. And that's really why a lot of ghost towns really don't exist anymore. Fires would just rip through them and wipe them out because most of the buildings were just made out of the trees and lumber in that valley. Georgetown had a volunteer fire service starting in 1870, which helped with the significant amount of preservation this area has seen. Many mining boom towns didn't have a dedicated fire service, so when a building would burn, there would be a good chance it would take a lot of other buildings with it, if not most of the town. Having a fire service helped save Georgetown from this happening and mitigated fire damage from getting way out of control. A few years after building this firehouse, they added a much larger tower on top in 1880. This had a few functions, working as a hose tower, lookout, and could house larger bells to warn the community of a fire. The town was very proud of their volunteer firefighters, and it became a position of great pride to become chief. The firehouse acted as a meeting hall as well, with the upstairs, the second floor here, still housing most of the original artifacts, and even the very carpet on the floor up there is original. So unfortunately, nobody's here right now, so we can't go inside. And something really cool that's unique about this place, there are specialized firefighter hats that were plated in silver. That just shows how plentiful silver was in this area. Can you imagine having a silver-plated firefighter hat? That is so cool. And one other little piece inside, along the walls in the main staircase, you can still find etches of people writing into the walls from the 1800s of some of the original firefighters from this town, which is so cool. Just walking in, literally seeing that history there. And really, that's probably one of the best ways to really truly know this place is original and has been here since that time. Okay, let's finish up the history of the Silver Queen of the Rockies by wrapping up in the ghost town of Silver Plume. Just 2 miles up this canyon by car or by train. But which way should we take? Well, I think I have an idea. Silver Plume's history is just as deeply embedded into Georgetown's history, just as much as Georgetown's history is deeply embedded into Silver Plume's history. Basically, one really wouldn't exist without the other. More so, Silver Plume probably wouldn't exist without Georgetown, because really Silver Plume was more or less like an extension of Georgetown. Basically, more and more claims kept being found up the canyon and up the mountain slopes around the Georgetown area. Neither would exist if it wasn't for the great gold and silver boom started by the Griffiths. So let's backtrack just a little to the height of the silver boom in this area. There are thousands of people all around this canyon taking their part in this event. The construction of a narrow gauge rail line began in the late 1870s to connect the towns of this valley all the way up past, hopefully, Silver Plume. The construction of a narrow gauge rail line began in the late 1870s to connect the towns and offer a much easier way to travel and transport ore or goods between them, since it wasn't exactly easy to do so. Even though they are just 2 miles apart, Georgetown and Silver Plume have a 600-foot elevation difference, which isn't exactly the easiest terrain to transport tons of ore and supplies up and down between. Building a railroad up this pass was no easy feat. It would need to be an engineering marvel to even be possible. Really, the ultimate goal was for the rail line to pass through Silver Plume and continue on to eventually link into Leadville that had just began its silver boom. Engineers said a railway couldn't be built here because the average grade is at least or above 6%, which is way too extreme for the locomotives that they wanted operating in this canyon. Fortunately, the head engineer of Georgetown, Breckenridge, and Leadville Railway came up with a genius solution of creating a corkscrew type layout that would feature a breathtaking horseshoe bridge that stands at the height of 95 feet, allowing passengers a grand view of this area. And that may or may not be the bridge right behind us that we had just seen a train passing over, bringing the railway's grade to just 3%. This route quickly became a tourist destination, with it being advertised one of the most scenic railroad experiences in the country. This golden period of train travel for this area ended in 1938 due to the decline of the general industry in this area, the Great Depression, and automobiles really starting to grab hold of transportation around the United States. Luckily, this railway was just too integral to the history of Colorado. So let's head on up these tracks and take the train up to Silver Plume Station and see how this place was saved. So the idea of preserving and rebuilding this engineering marvel of the time began in 1959, when 100 acres of land along this very route was donated to get the train rolling back along these tracks of this historic route. At the start, the progress was pretty slow, but over time, efforts slowly grew into rebuilding this dream. The project received a significant boost once it became a part of the National Historic District of Silver Plume and Georgetown. By 1973, the restoration process began in Silver Plume, right at this very spot. They started laying track up here because if they would have started at the lower end, they would have had to deal with the bridge right away, which they just didn't have funding for just yet. So they decided to work their way down to the bridge. And this was done by 1977. And at this point, they had already started running excursions up and down the available track. But the key piece that what made this rail line famous still needed to be built. This finally happened when they received $1 million grant to fund this restoration. A replica of the bridge was completed in 1984, and the rail line was finally whole again, able to take visitors from Georgetown to Silver Plume along this impressive route. Over the years, the Historical Society has taken time to fully restore the rail shop and depot here in Silver Plume, allowing them to maintain the current rail fleet and restore some older cars as well. So if you're passing by, it is not a bad idea to even just take a little pit stop and check out the museum they have in the back and go check out the original old restored station. This is definitely a cool little jewel of railroad history hidden in the Rockies. We have arrived at the final leg of today's historic venture of exploring the Silver Queen of the Rockies, bringing us here to the functioning ghost town of Silver Plume, Colorado. Sitting at just over 9,100 feet above sea level, these gravel roads we're standing on right now are built on history, with the locals wanting to preserve its rich past, which you really can't escape from because these mountainsides basically have you literally surrounded by it, which are full of echoes of the past boom and bust mines scattering throughout all the cliff sides around us. Silver Plume had a late start compared to Georgetown, not really becoming a prominent fixture for this area until the late 1860s, when much of the mining had started to take place around the mountainsides here, with rich silver veins lying throughout the mountainsides here, bringing many workers up here and quickly establishing a small town. Unfortunately, they didn't see nearly the investment as Georgetown did, so the amenities and structures paled in comparison to Georgetown during this era. There was a pretty deep resentment of the population here that grew towards Georgetown because they felt most of the money was being pulled out of here and taken down the valley, which, I mean, really it was. Prime example of this was in the 1880s, a fire came through and ravaged the entire downtown section of Silver Plume, and they could do nothing about it. And if they just had a little bit more investment, similar to Georgetown, who had a dedicated fire company, that probably could have been preventable. Today, locals are trying to keep this town going by remodeling some of the original buildings and giving them a new life. Bread right behind us here is one of those buildings. Once the local bakery supplying the town with fresh baked bread and other goods has become a local hangout. Overall, the owners have done a great job with preserving this property, keeping it with its original character, but also repurposing it for another use. With the other two main businesses along this quiet ghost town, including the Plume Coffee Company and Silver Plume Provisions. All three are 1800s era buildings as well, and have done an equally great job at keeping their respective buildings intact and breathing new life back into this historic main street. Mining in this area wasn't just hard on the equipment and the logistics of moving everything around, but it was hard on the miners as well. There are hiking trails, well, the one we're on right now, leading up the side of these mountains that start pretty much right next to the downtown of Silver Plume. And these hiking trails are built on top of the old paths the miners used to use to trek up and down from the mines. So if you're here and you're feeling adventurous, definitely take the 730 mine trail all the way up to the top. To really be able to put yourself in their shoes and take the trek hundreds, well, if not thousands of people have taken just to get to work. And along this path, you will be able to see a rare glimpse of a lot of the original mining infrastructure laid out along the mountainside, including hundreds, if not millions of tons of waste piles. And behind us here, a large chute that would send material down the mountain, where millions of dollars in their money at that time, which in today's money is in the billions of dollars, of silver-rich ore was extracted. And this trail takes us up to the 730 mine, which is arguably one of the most famous mines here in Silver Plume. So let's keep on trekking up to the top and check out an interesting story about the monument at the end of this trail and how this specific mine gained its name. Our first stop at the top of this hike is the Griffin Monument. Now, not only does this monument bring you out to an awesome overlook of I-70 and Silver Plume, but it also marks the spot of a tragic tale. So there was a man named Clifford Griffin. He began his life across the pond in England and moved to the United States to start a new life when tragically his soon-to-be wife, a day before the wedding, had passed away. He eventually found himself here in Silver Plume, working alongside his brother, helping him run his silver mine here. Now, he was pretty well known throughout Silver Plume as being a pretty good boss and taking care of his employees, but generally kind of kept to himself. And so he kept to his secluded ways and built a cabin very close to the mine he managed, the 730 mine, way up top high on this mountain. Known for playing a violin that would echo throughout the valley below, a lot of the locals of Silver Plume in this mining district would come out and listen to the evening song. But on one infamous night, he came walking out of his cabin, just like any other evening, violin in hand, came out and played songs just like any other. And a lot of people in the valley below listened just like normal. But when the violin stopped, a loud crack echoed throughout, sounding eerily similar to a gunshot. People raced up the trails to see if he was okay, but no help could be given. They found him face down in a grave he had personally dug, leaving a note for them to find, saying to leave him where he lies, to allow him to lay at rest. And so the miners did just that, but they didn't just leave any old grave marker. They left this large monument right here to commemorate him. George Griffin, son of Alfred Griffin, Esquire, of Grand Hall, Shropshire, England. Born July 2nd, 1847, died June 19th, 1887. In compliance of his own request, buried here in this spot. So that's the story of Clifford Griffin and the Clifford Griffin Monument. So let's get to the end of this Miners Trail and wrap up this historic venture. Well, here we are, the end of this miner's path and the entrance of the 730 mine. Now this mine is given this name because it opened an hour later than any of the other mines along this path due to the long climb just to get up here. Well, here we are, the end of this journey through Georgetown and Silver Plume, or also known as the Silver Queen of the Rockies. So I just want to say thank you for watching. These take a lot of time to research, to script write, and then to also find shooting locations and to shoot this. And generally, I have a lot of fun making these. I think it's awesome doing the research, learning about an area, and then going hands-on with the history. Like this rock right here came out of this mine shaft from miners that hiked up this daily to extract silver ore out of this rock well over 100 years ago. And just imagine all the stories that this material, this hole in the ground has to tell. And I really hope you enjoyed these videos too. So please like and subscribe to the video. Leave a comment of any other stories you'd like me to cover or venture to, because the more this channel grows, the farther and bigger topics we can cover. So once again, thank you for watching and joining us on this history venture. All right, I will see you on the next one. And generally at this point, I will be making one of these every other video. So you'll get at least one of these each month, because these are just doing too good. This is just about as much as I can do for right now between life. So I'll see you on the next history venture.